Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I really hope you're all well. I have not been doing kind of like monthly wrap-ups or TBR videos recently, mostly because, to be honest, I've been trying to stick to TBRs and failing miserably, so I've kind of taken it upon myself to just pick up whatever I feel like in the month of March to kind of try and improve my reading experience for the year. And when it comes to wrap-up videos, I have filmed them. They just haven't ended up being uploaded because I have been super busy with uni and my personal life, and then when it's come to uploading I realised that it's just too late in the month. So I'm really sorry about that, but what I have decided to do today is just kind of do a little wrap up in general of what I have been reading recently, which basically kind of encapsulates all of February and all of March so far. So that's what we're going to do. I'm just going to talk you through what I have read recently, let you know what I liked, what I didn't like, and yeah, I'm just going to get on into it. So the first book I want to talk to you guys about is Verity by Colleen Hoover. This is the first Colleen Hoover novel I have read. It's been on my kind of want to read list for a little while. I think I saw somebody online talking about it late last year and it just sounded right up my street, so I thought I would dive in and try it. So I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, and the reason being is just that I actually really loved the book the whole way through, but the ending massively let it down for me and I just didn't think it was necessary. This book is basically kind of a bit of a thriller romance. Probably more so thriller than romance, to be fair, but it definitely has a kind of a romance element to it, which I understand is what Colleen Hoover is more well known for. Like I say, this was my first Colleen Hoover novel, so I haven't actually tried any of her others. But this basically follows the story of Lowen, I forgot her name then, yeah, Lowen, who is a struggling writer whose mum's just died. She's living in New York, she's struggling for money, and she gets invited to a meeting with her editor, or her agent, sorry, where she gets asked to go to the home of a really famous author, thriller author, and finish off writing the series of books that she's been working on because she has had this tragic accident and she is unable to complete the series. So after a little bit of deliberation, Lowen decides to take the job and she goes to the house and she kind of discovers that all just really is not what it seems. She finds a book written by the author that is kind of autobiographical and that paints her life in a very, very, very different picture from what is kind of expected and what is known. And the events that follow are shocking, to say the least. Now, like I say, I loved the book up until the ending. I thought the ending really let it down and I just didn't think it was necessary. It was kind of like an epilogue situation that ruined the book, and I think if she left off that epilogue and just left it at the end of the final chapter, would have been perfect and it would have been like a 5 out of 5 star read. But honestly, that final few pages did kind of ruin the experience a little bit for me. That said, it was an enjoyable read. I sailed through it. I think I read it in 24 hours. I did enjoy the story. It was, like I say, just that ending that let it down for me. But I would recommend picking it up and trying it, especially if you want something that's just kind of like fast paced, a little bit creepy, that just gets your heart rate going a little bit, and is a little bit smutty as well. So yeah, we enjoyed it. Next up, I reread an old favourite and I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars again. I also annotated a little bit this time. I absolutely adore this book and I could rave for so long about the many, many, many reasons why I adore this book, and I think maybe I will do a separate video on it at some point, or maybe do like a my 5 favourite books of all time kind of thing where I can talk a little bit more in depth. So this follows the story of Monique, who is a journalist in New York, and she gets hired to go and interview probably the most famous actress in the world, Evelyn Hugo. And when she gets there, she's expecting just like a one-off interview, but Evelyn actually asks her to write her life story. And the book basically follows a structure whereby you get like a chapter on Evelyn's life, and then as if you're reading kind of the biography, and then you also kind of see the interactions between Monique and Evelyn as well. This, honestly, it's everything. This book, it is heartbreaking, it's beautiful, it makes me cry, it makes me happy, it makes me laugh, it is just everything. And Evelyn is one of the most flawed but also incredibly strong female characters I have ever read, and I love her so much. Like I literally love this book so much, and it's another one of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books where I feel like it exists. Like, I had the similar experience with Daisy Jones and the Six when I finished that I wanted to go and listen to their entire discography, and obviously it didn't exist. And with this, I want to go and watch all of Evelyn Hugo's movies, and they don't exist, and it makes me really sad, because honestly, just incredible book. If you haven't picked it up already, I highly recommend it. There are some trigger warnings for domestic violence, sexual abuse, and I want to say eating disorders as well, I think, but it is done with respect, and it is done with sympathy to the victims, if that makes sense. It is honestly just a truly fantastic book, and if you haven't read it already, I do highly recommend it. It's one of those books that I feel like sits with you for a long time after you finish it, and yeah, I love it. And I have a different experience every time I read it, but every single time I read it and every single experience is so overwhelmingly positive. So yeah, that's how I feel about Evelyn Hugo. Okay, I'm gonna whiz through these next ones, because I then basically did a full reread of the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. So we have A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Wings and Ruin, and A Court of Frost and Starlight. All of these were 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely love them. I will leave a link in the down bar to my kind of ranking Sarah J Maas books video, which is where I talk a little bit more in depth about these. And I also did a rereading my favourites vlog last summer about A Court of Thorns and Roses as well. So if you haven't read the book before, I'd recommend going and watching those videos for kind of a better summary. But basically, I was rereading those in preparation for the release of A Court of Silver Flames, which I also read in the month of February, and I've also done a dedicated video too. I don't know if it'll be up by the time this goes up. If it is, I will leave it linked. If it's not, look out for it. It's coming, where I basically talk about that in full spoiler-free detail. But for anyone who doesn't know, that is the latest installment in the series and follows the story of Nesta Archeron, who is Feyre's sister, and her kind of recovery from the events that happen in A Court of Wings and Ruin. It's brilliant, and I give a 4 out of 5 stars, I think, and I will explain my slightly lower rating for it in that video too. So make sure you either look out for it, or if it's already up, go watch it. Okay, so after my read of A Court of Silver Flames, I reread another favourite, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I read this with my friends for our book club, and this was another 5 out of 5 star experience as well. I truly love this book. I think I've spoken about it before too, but it is one of my all-time favourites. This time I had a slightly different reading experience, because I think I was reading a little bit more critically rather than reading it for the storyline, which obviously I did the first time I read it. Because I knew everything that kind of happens in this book, I was able to almost step back from the narrative slightly and just look at the book as a whole a little bit more. And I think I still enjoyed my reading experience. I still gave it the same rating as I did the first time, because ultimately I love this book so much. But I was able to see a little bit more of the flaws in this book too, for example, like the pacing and how self-indulgent the writing is at times. I also made a point in my book club chat with the girls that I really don't like kind of Camilla's character arc in this, because I feel like she's just the token female character to make the main group diverse. And of course what happens to her centres around her sexuality and her use as like a romantic plot point, rather than her actually having any character development and any kind of character arc of her own. That said, I do like the book, I do like the story, I do like how atmospheric the writing is, and how you do feel like you are just completely submerged in this academic life in Vermont. Yeah, I did like it, and I just realised I've not even kind of summed up what the book's about. It basically follows a group of eccentric students at college in Vermont studying classics with a crazy professor called Julian, and they basically get they are so influenced by what they're studying that they try to embrace some parts of ancient Greece in their reality. I'm not going to kind of go into any more details than that, but things start to go a little bit awry. Things are out of hand. There is a murder, which isn't giving anything away because it literally talks about it in the first couple of pages, and obviously the story then follows kind of what happens in the lead up to and in the immediate aftermath of the murder. It is very good, and I do highly recommend you reading it. This is like dark academia at its absolute finest, and I love it. I feel like this book is nearly 30 years old now. Was it written in 92? Yeah, it was written in 92, so this is 30 years old next year, which means I'm also 30 years old next year. I don't know how I feel about that. Next up, I read American Dirt by Janine Cummins. Now, you will have seen me talk about this in my kind of most anticipated, not most anticipated, my books I want to read in 2021 video, and I've been really excited to pick this up. This was my first kind of mood read pick, and I'm really glad I did. This was so good. I think this was 4 out of 5 stars. I can't remember why I didn't give it 5 in the end. There was a reason, but this was brilliant. It was fast paced, it was exciting, it made me sad, it made me happy, I laughed, I very nearly cried in several parts, and honestly I thought it was fantastic. And it follows the story of a woman called Lydia and her young son Luca, who experienced their family being murdered around them by the Mexican drug cartels, and therefore have to flee Acapulco to save their own lives. And basically it follows their journey from Acapulco to trying to claim asylum in the US. It is quite a harrowing story. It definitely, I think, sheds more light on the migrant crisis from South America that the news kind of fails to adequately kind of what's the word I'm looking for, represent, especially in the UK. I think maybe perhaps if you're watching this from America or from South America, you will obviously have a much broader understanding of this subject than we do in England. I think over here we have a very small kind of exposure to it, in the sense of we only really hear about it if this kind of like when Trump was building the wall, for example. Obviously it was on our news over here, but for the most part we don't ever see this, we don't ever like learn much about this. So it was very eye-opening for me, and yeah, I was honestly quite shocked. And the author does kind of have 2 almost like mini essays in the back of the book where she talks about her research process and how she was learning about the kind of like migrant process in more depth before she wrote. And the statistics that she puts in there, honestly, they're mind-blowing. And yeah, it was an emotional read. It was a very good read, and I really enjoyed it. And I feel like I almost shouldn't say that I enjoyed it, because to a lot of people this is real life, it's not fiction. But yeah, it was phenomenal, and I highly recommend picking it up and giving it a go. I think it's out in paperback now as well if you don't want the hardback copy. But yeah, this was one again that will stick with me for quite some time. It was an emotional read, but it was a really good one. So after I finished American Dirt, I finally just gave in to what I've been wanting to read pretty much since January, which was just smutty romance basically, and I picked up Corrupt by Penelope Douglas. This is my first Penelope Douglas novel, and wow. I read this in 24 hours. This is the first in the Devil's Night series, and I'll be honest, like when I first started reading it, like I did struggle with the writing a little bit to begin with. I didn't think it was great, but then she kind of like got into the flow of the book, and all of a sudden I was super invested and I freaking loved it. And it was so dark and it was so disturbing in so many ways, and for some reason I was here for it, and I loved it, and I really want the rest of the series. And it's kind of made me want to read a lot of like dark romance, to be honest. I have quite a few dark romance books on my Kindle which I want to get to this month. This one I bought in paperback form, and obviously I want the rest of the series in paperback. I do like the fact that these indie romances are obviously self-published. I feel like that's the same with Verity by Colleen Hoover that I showed before, which I'm sure she is published traditionally as well, and I think Penelope Douglas is too. But I do like having these kind of like indie paperbacks. I don't know what it is about them, but I just am really enjoying having some self-published books. But yeah, this is brilliant. This follows the story of Erica, who is dating a guy, but kind of really like is obsessed with his older brother Michael, and Michael for some reason kind of really hates her, and it's all very confusing. You don't really know why. And then all of a sudden she moves to a new city, she moves to a new school, and she ends up being plunged into Michael's world. And wow, basically there is a lot there is a lot going on, but him and his friends are trying to get revenge on Erica for something that happened to them 3 years previously, and she has literally no idea. It's all very fast-paced, dangerous, kind of confusing, but gets wrapped up very well at the end. And I feel like the main characters in this book, the main guys in this book, I think are the ones that you follow in the rest of the series, I feel like. So anyway, yeah, I don't know if I've done a very good job of selling that, but it was brilliant and I really loved it, and I'm surprised at how much I loved it and almost a little bit disturbed about how much I loved it, but there we go, I just really enjoyed it. So I recommend. Okay, which takes us up to where we are now, which is the Sylas One, which is the first book in the Elite Kings Club series by Amo Jones. This was one that I discovered. I started following a girl on here called Morta Mary, who does a lot of kind of like dark taboo romance recommendations. She really loved this book, and it was where I got kind of the Penelope Douglas recommendation from, so I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. I gave this 2 stars. Honestly, the story itself was kind of compelling, and I do feel, even though I gave this 2 stars, I might give the next book in the series a go just to see where it goes. I found the story really compelling, but honestly the writing was just absolutely horrendous. Like, the plot was all over the place, the characters were contradicting themselves every 2 minutes, the writing was just messy, disordered, and I feel like it was just really immature writing, which I feel like a dick for saying that, because like, who am I to criticize an author? But I just really didn't think the writing was very good. I have to be honest, it was terrible. But the actual plot itself was really interesting, and it basically followed the story of Madison, who moves to a new school. Her mum's just died, so her mum basically killed Madison's father's mistress and then shot herself with Madison's gun. Crazy times. And then Madison obviously moves school, her father's remarried, and then it turns out that the new mum has a stepson that goes to Madison's school who's just moving into her house. Like, there's no kind of like pre-warning, there's no like, oh, by the way, her dad just rings her and is like, oh, by the way, your stepbrother's moving in today, and Madison's like, oh, okay. And her stepbrother is part of this group of guys at school that call themselves the Elite Kings, and there was something a little bit off about them. They're a little bit dark, they're a little bit dangerous, nobody really trusts them, nobody knows why. But they seem to be obsessed with Madison, and Madison is obsessed with them, but it's like from like a dark, it's very dark. That's all I can really say about it without giving anything away. And there's like a bit of a, well, it's kind of like a supernatural element to it as well, but of like folklore kind of thrown in there, and it's very confusing, as you can probably tell. I can't really sum it up. I really can't sum it up. But it was an interesting plot idea, and I feel like it could have been done so much better than it was, basically. That's probably the worst summary of a book I have ever given in my life, but it was an interesting read. Anyway, my lunch is ready, so I'm gonna go and eat. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Please do let me know, give me a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new, and I will see you again in another one very soon. Bye guys.